There is a question that is asked very frequently. If God exists, why is there evil and suffering? And there are multiple ways this question can be asked. On one hand, you have someone who is intellectually disturbed by the idea of a good God allowing bad things. And on the other hand, you also have people who have suffered, who have lost loved ones, and their heart has been hurt by suffering. And I understand that there are a lot of people who see evil, and their mind screams and cries, why is this allowed? Why doesn't anyone do anything? How could God allow such things to happen? And I think the question needs to be asked, is it a problem of the head or the heart? Are we waving our fists at God because we can't reconcile our thoughts with the concept of a good God? Or is it that our hearts cry out for justice, and that we have experienced pain and want to know why this is allowed in the first place? So let's break down the question first, logically. If God exists, why do bad things happen? Let's assume for a moment there is no God. That means that people are the result of a process of adaptation and evolution. Through natural selection and survival of the fittest, we have populated the world and shaped it to better enable our survival. Now, if this is the world we live in, then there is no concept of bad. What you consider to be good or bad is thrown out the window, because it's subjective. It's your own personal opinion. So you might ask, but what about death? Well, death is a natural biological process. What about injustice and oppression? In a world without God, there is no objective moral standard for you to stand on. If someone rapes, murders, or is just an overall jerk, it doesn't change the fact that it's completely justified considering there is no right way to live. That's what subjective morality is. So if you say to me, there are bad things in the world, I'll say to you, there can only be bad things if God exists. God sets the standard. He is the moral lawgiver. And so if there is God, then there is good and bad. And if there isn't God, then there isn't any good and bad. It's just what I believe is good, what I think is bad. But it has no practical meaning, it's just my opinion. And this works in the reverse as well. There's no good without God either. Feeding the hungry or poor is not a good deed, it's just a waste. Saving an elderly person's life is a waste of resources and time. If life is simply the fittest survive and the weak die, then every child who is sick should be left to die. Not only can they not provide for themselves, but they are wasting excess resources for the people who can. And that sounds absurd. But if our existence is nothing more than a cosmic accident, then that's just how the world works. The morality that we stand on to judge, that is not our own morality. And to say that God is not real because bad things simply misses the point. God has to be real for things to be bad in the first place. That's why it's funny to me that a lot of people who try to debunk Christianity use that genuine question as a weapon, when in reality they are actually admitting to the existence of God. But who really cares? I mean, even if God is real, why would a supposedly good God allow evil and suffering? Doesn't that just show the God of the Bible isn't real? Again, speaking purely on the rational side for the moment, what do we mean when we say God allows evil? Because truth be told, if God didn't allow evil, we wouldn't exist. Everyone has sinned in their lifetime. What is sin? Well, sin is an act of cosmic treason. It's putting your own desires above the purpose God has given you. And what does God want? He wants to love us. Can you force someone to love you? No. So God must give us will, agency, the ability to make decisions. And when we make bad decisions, God has to make a decision himself. Is it better to have a world of people who do bad things but exist, or no world at all? So when we ask, why does God allow this, we need to be careful. I know I'm not sinless, and I'm sure if you analyze your life, you'll say the same. Now, if God didn't allow bad things to exist, that means he would have to destroy me, you, and everything else too. Do you really understand what you're asking for? This is why we need to humble ourselves. If you think you're better than God, then fine. But understand that the consequences of your proposal are a lot more than just God shouldn't let bad things happen. Because the logical conclusion is, the only way to end bad things from happening is to eliminate all the bad things. That includes all of us. And I don't think we want God to hit the cosmic reset button, or send the floodwaters a second time. So we need to be careful in our moral outrage. Not because it's wrong to be outraged, but because we need to understand the larger picture. But now we have to tackle the more emotional aspect of the question. Because there are more reasons that God allows evil. These reasons may not be the most intellectually compelling, scholarly explanations, but sometimes that's not a bad thing. If someone is hurt emotionally, they might need a different answer to the question, if God exists, why do bad things happen? And that's to be expected. If I felt hurt, betrayed, I wouldn't want some argument. I will want understanding and clarity. First, let's look at the scriptural reason why God allows suffering. The fall is the Christian belief that in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve committed the first sin when they took of the fruit of the tree of knowledge and good and evil, ate, and thus sinned against God. When Adam and Eve brought sin into the human experience, they shackled us with this bondage of sin. So after the fall, people were no longer free. Rather, they were slaves to their own desires. Instead of being able to live in accordance with God and nature, we acted against it and do evil as a result. What was the role of man in the garden? To maintain the creation. We were given a world designed and molded to our every need, and yet, when we committed our act of cosmic treason, we also damned the rest of creation that we were meant to preserve. So after that first act of rebellion, we have not lived in a perfect world. There is disease, natural disaster, death. We have tried to one-up perfection and have instead created all the evil and suffering that affects us. So what does that mean for us today? Well, we don't live in the same world that Adam and Eve lived. Our world has been corrupted. We have to deal with death, hunger, and disease because of it. So why does evil exist? Us. Why do people suffer? Us. Because we have committed treason. We have disobeyed and gone against the wishes of the highest authority. Think about it this way. If a child were to hit another child, they would be punished, of course. But would that punishment be as severe as if they had hit their teacher? Now let's say that same child was to hit a police officer. Wouldn't their punishment be more than hitting their friend or their teacher? But why? Was the action not the same? Did the child not hit all of them the same way? Of course he did. But it doesn't change the fact that one has more authority over the other. When you move up the food chain, the consequences of your actions increase as well. And at the top of that food chain is God. And so if you slight an infinite being, doesn't that mean you would have an infinite punishment? We have broken the highest law of the land, the law of God. But God, in His mercy, has offered us a hand of forgiveness. He has allowed a way for us not only to be forgiven of our infinite punishment, to repay our infinite debts, but to also live with Him for eternity. This is why Christ died on the cross. God understood our problems. God understands our suffering. And He made a sacrifice of His own so that we could one day live without suffering and without death. The heart of the gospel is triumph over evil, victory over suffering, conquering of death. Why does God allow evil, suffering, death? If the final judgment happened today, if the trumpets blew and the angels declared the coming of the Lord while you're watching this video, think of how many people would be lost. Think of how many people you know in your own life that have converted. You yourself could have recently converted. And are you not grateful for that opportunity? And isn't it true that we experience pain and suffering, we also learn from it and we grow from it? Isn't it true that as we grow older, we mature, and part of that maturity is accepting that bad things will happen and moving forward from it? Would you be the same person if you never experienced pain? If you were never sad or upset? Do you think that you would be a better person if you hadn't experienced those things? I think in the end, we need to understand that in order to learn and grow as people, we can't just have happy and fun all the time. Could we find contentment if we've never lost anything? Will we truly appreciate our loved ones if we had never lost them? There's a story of a man talking to a young boy, and this boy was complaining about his mother had been so strict and punished him, and how upset he was at his mom. And the man looked at him and said, "I wish I had my mother. Even if she was strict and punished me, I wish I still had her." And the boy stopped and started to truly understand what he had. Appreciation and maturity come from understanding not to take what we have for granted. Even if you don't have what others have, you still have the greatest gift God has given, life. And this life you are given comes with the caveat that you might have to experience pain, that you might have to suffer loss. But in the end, I can't give a definitive answer. I can't speak on behalf of God, and I don't want my explanations to be taken as gospel. And though I have tried to do my best to articulate my thoughts, I have no authority or final say. But I will ask that you please read the Bible, go to church, and pray. So I want to thank you all very much for watching, and God bless.